I literally looked at the Wikipedia page today, but didn't. I was like, I'll listen to Charles. So explain it to us. What is its history?
It's inexplicable, and I find it difficult with capoeira in particular, but with art in generally, to sort of find a form of words that adequately expresses what its essence is. So I'm not going to do that.
Great.
But I can talk a bit about the history, and then I mentioned I've got a video. You can kind of see it in action, and then perhaps you guys can take that away and tell me what your experience of it is. Yeah. I mean, my experience of capoeira is obviously very, very personal to me, and I like I mentioned how I found capoeira, and I've been on the journey with it as well. I think it has brought many things to my life. Like it has transformed me as a person. I met my wife. She's a capoeirista. She's been in training as long as I have. I have a huge, network of friends and community around capoeira. So there are many gifts that it has presented me with. In addition to obviously the benefits that you get from training in a physical art form. But the roots of capoeira are broadly accepted as it's originated through the transatlantic slave trade. So, well, let me take that back. So the early aspects of capoeira, so things like the sort of sitting in a circle, the drum, playing out this kind of theatrical ballet, those have existed for eons in Africa, right? And the main instrument you'll see, I think I'm going to show you here. I'm not sure if you can see it, but this is a birimbau, and effectively it's like it's the world's oldest instrument. It's just a very simple bow. So like you might see, I don't know if you can see it here, but there's a little metal wire here. So it's the type of thing you might see if you're kind of having a bow and arrow, and then at the bottom is a calabash. And that's what resonates. That's where the resonance comes from. So you strike that with the string, and it lets out this gorgeous tone. Just put it down there. So so that's existed in Africa for hundreds of years. And then it came the sort of the transatlantic slave trade, and what happened at that point was that people were taken from West Africa and transported to Brazil, obviously, but they retained aspects of their culture, obviously, one of them being capoeira, and one of them being what was the precursor to capoeira. And then they started to use that. They started to use capoeira as a tool of resistance, so to keep themselves in physical shape, and also to defend themselves, and to kind of to fight back against the kind of the oppressive system of slavery. So as the story goes, whilst they were training capoeira, they disguised it as a dance, so that their slave masters, when they were practicing in these huge basically sheds, they're called quilombos, these sort of huge spaces where the slaves would have been kept. They would train, and they would train, intensively, but they would run the risk of somebody coming in, what's this noise and what's going on, and they'd have to, we're just dancing. So they'd disguise this martial art in a dance, and so that's the kind of the genesis of this, what eventually has become capoeira. And at some point, it sort of went underground as slavery was abolished. It became something that was used as a tool for kind of the underworld, really. So people would sort of what you call it, malandros, people, bad people, gangsters and whatnot, would train capoeira and would use it to defend themselves and to fight in the streets. So there are knife forms, for example, with it as well, which you don't train. There are a lot of martial aspects to it, and so it was outlawed in Brazil for many years. And then at some point in the sort of 1960s, I believe, it started to gain more prominence. and more acceptance in the wider society.
So when did you find Capoeira?
I sort of wonder whether Capoeira came to me or whether I came to it. It's a really quite intriguing kind of experience, because I think there have been at least 3 different occasions where Capoeira had presented itself, and I found it interesting. And I think the first time I ever saw it, I didn't actually know what it was.
Mm-hmm.
I was sort of in my early 20s, and actually in my late teens actually, and I was on the London clubbing scene. Actually very just at the top of just by Angel, there was a club called Icini's. I don't know if you.
Oh yes, I remember Icini's.
I was there one evening with my friends, and there was this stuff going on in the basement. There were these people sitting around in a circle, and my friends were like, we were young guys, and so we were sort of out on the town, and I was completely I would say just in a trance, just watching this movement and this poetry of just coordination and this almost balletic performance to this music. And I really didn't know what I was witnessing, but that was Capoeira. That was my first real experience of Capoeira. And it was just a really memorable and magical moment for me. I literally spent the whole evening there just watching these guys moving around. So I didn't do anything with that experience. I just kind of, kept on doing what I was doing. I think I was actually doing martial arts, a different type of martial arts at the time, where I was doing wushu quan. Mm-hmm. It's like a Chinese boxing at that time. So a couple of years later on, I met a friend of a friend who they were doing Capoeira, and they told me all about it, and I was like, oh yeah, I remember thinking I've seen something like that many years ago, and it was just one of these things that are just in the back of your mind that you kind of, there is a hook there, but you're not really aware of it, mm-hmm. And yes, and then I'd gone to South America. I lived in Argentina for a little while. My landlady was an avid capoeirista, so she just couldn't stop talking about it. She's like, come, you've got to check it out. And I was kind of weirded out by her, if I'm honest, because I was just thinking, why it is all these people sort of dressed in these funny clothes doing all of these sorts of things, and she was just so so into it. I just thought, well, yeah, I'll give it a go, but I didn't at all. I was just totally, like I said, a bit weirded out. But again, that kind of thing in the back of my mind was like, actually, that's pretty interesting. Came back to London. Again, a couple of years had gone by, and after my South America experience, I was really into salsa. So I joined a salsa club. I was doing salsa for about 4 years. I was really into the salsa scene, and I remember one of a salsa partner I had. You put your hand on your partner's back, and I could just feel this sort of steely kind of sinewy back that my partner had. I was like, you must be doing something other than salsa, because your physique is just tremendous. And she mentioned that, I do capoeira. There's a class in North London. I was like, okay, I've got to go. And that's how I got into it, and haven't looked back since.
Gosh, and how many years has that been now?
Oh God, I want to say that was in 2001. So that's quite a while ago. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great. And have you been training consistently since then, or have you taken time out?
I think it's part of me. Okay. So it's one of these. I think with any art, you sort of it grows beyond the sort of just the physical sort of training aspect of it. So even I have had periods of more intense training and less intense training, if I would say that, but that's the physical bit. So what I found, I've had a number of injuries, for example.
Yeah.
I had an operation on my knee, which took me out for like 6 months, and I just couldn't train. Mm-hmm. But what I found that was, and I'll talk about it in a minute, is, capoeira is a multi-dimensional art form. So you have the physical movements and you train for the physical movement, but there's also the non-physical aspect. So there's the singing, there's the tradition, there's the language. We speak Portuguese, so we don't even speak in English. Mm-hmm. There's all of and then you get into the sort of the more esoteric aspects of it. So within those songs that you sing, there's also an esoteric transmission, I'd say. Like, you can almost feel and hear and experience what masters of the past were going through the songs that they're singing. So, even though I wasn't necessarily training the physical capoeira, you could train the metaphysical or the esoteric at the same time, or the singing at the same time. So I actually found that when I wasn't training physically, I could still experience capoeira quite on quite a deep level. Yeah. And I'm not sure if you maybe it's a question like that. I think maybe you find in Shorinji Kempo and other martial arts as well, is that I find that my experience, at least physical training, is I kind of reach a plateau quite quickly, in that I want to learn a sort of a sequence or a movement, and I'll kind of practice and practice and practice, and eventually you get there, or you get there thereabouts, and you feel, okay, that's I kind of know that now, and you search and yearn and hunger for something other than the physical, and that's what's been so amazing about capoeira.
Yeah, I also think it's something to do with longevity too. We spend a lot of time sort of practicing the same form and repeating the same form, whereas you and I both in tech, we don't actually, tech comes and new technology and you just sort of repeat it. You don't get a chance to sort of engage as deeply as you do within sort of that art form. So it is sort of fundamentally an art form. I think it's really interesting that in the sort of 1960s, because our Shorinji Kempo kind of came into its form in the 1960s, there was this huge diaspora that moved from Japan to Brazil at about the same time. So that's when you see this sort of movement of things like judo and Kempo and karate through the world.
There are two prominent masters that if you want to study more about, that I encourage you to look at. One master was Master Bimba, or Mestre Bimba, and he developed what was known as the sort of the regional, style of capoeira. And maybe this is probably what you've seen if you've seen any promotional videos where people are spinning on their noses and doing multiple flips and all that sorts of thing. This hails from that style. So it's a lot more regimented. Mm-hmm. They have a belt grading system, as you might see with with kind of Eastern martial arts. They have a grading system, so you go through a batizado, which is a bit like a grading ceremony. You get a certificate, and you get different colored belts as you progress. Mm-hmm. So they adopted that form. It became that's a lot more socialized in that way, and a lot more accepted in that way. And then there's another form which was developed by a master called Mestre Pastinha. So if you look at that form is called the Capoeira Angola style, and a lot of people think it's more authentic. Kind of, it's a lot more closer to the roots of capoeira because it's a little less showy, mm-hmm. and it's a lot more. There's a lot more, I would say, Africanness to it, maybe in a word. So mm-hmm. there's the songs that are sung in a different tempo. Mm-hmm. There's more musicality to it. So there are more instruments that are played. So not just in the regional style, there's just one of these that they'll play, and it'll be the main instrument. And then in the Angola style, you play with this style, which is quite a big one. It's a gunga. So this is like the bass. It gives the rhythm. And then there are two others that syncopate with it, like you have a viola and a medium. So the Angola style is there's a lot more musicality to it. And that's the style that I've decided to release. Did
you try both and then ended up sort of choosing?
Yes. I started with the regional style because, again, it's the crowd pleaser. I call it the crowd pleaser. I mean, it's doing it a disservice because it's an amazing art. But you see it and you want to do all of the the floreos, these movements, the spins, the kicks, all of these things. You see it and you're like, I'm going to do all that, and then after a while, I like I said, I kind of got to a plateau and realized, well, actually, I need something a bit more meaty, and there is a lot more of that in Angola.
I know you have a video.
I'm just going to play it.
And so that looked amazing, really interesting. Do you have like set techniques that you learn as you go through, or is it all sort of by feel and by dance movements, or is it?
Yeah, so there are, I'm not sure if you'll have seen, but there are certain, I'd say there's like a language.
Mm-hmm.
So there's like a vocabulary,
Uh-huh.
and there are certain, let's call them forms, for want
Yeah.
of a better word. There are certain forms that are in that language that one can anticipate and respond to.
Mm-hmm.
So that, you know, at what you have seen there is like the epitome of what is capoeira. So, you know, this kind of circle, what we call this roda, and at the head of the circle is an orchestra, a batteria of instruments. And then there'll be at the center of that batteria, there'll be this berimbau. There'll be the master who's effectively controlling what's kind of happening. So it's a multi-layered system in that you have to, whilst you're actually in the circle and moving and responding to your wouldn't say opponent, responding to your friend. So you're having a conversation with someone in that circle with your movements, using this language, but there isn't a set or formulaic way of getting from A to B. So everything happens very much spontaneously, as we are having a conversation right now.
Yep.
So it's a system of sort of call and response, question and answer. But at the same time as you're playing with your friend, and we play capoeira, we don't fight capoeira, we play capoeira. At the same time as you play with your friend, you are connected to the instruments and to the music. So the instruments and the music are as much a fundamental part of what happens as the movement itself. So the master may, for example, communicate to you that he or she wants you to play in a certain way, wants you to speed up or slow down, wants you to stop. So you need to be sensitive to that. So your senses need to be alive to, you know, what's happening, and you've seen it's very, very fast and the kick's coming and you need to respond to, otherwise you're going to get hit. As well as, you know, listening to what's happening in the batteria.
And I never see anyone get hit when they're playing. So does that happen, and does that stop the play, or is that part and parcel? Because we're a full contact martial arts, so I'm really intrigued by that.
I mean, you can find anything in capoeira, really. So it's a martial art. So at the end of the day, you can find yourself in a fight situation in the roda, and you have to respond to it. So if somebody wants to attack you, you know, I've seen people get hurt. People get kicked all the time. People break bones, and I've seen people been sent to hospital because of injuries they've sustained in the roda. It's not, the general intent isn't to hit your opponent. But you need to be ready for that. And as I mentioned before, it has got elements of, you know, the street in it. So, you know, a very traditional part of capoeira is to just go out into the street, set up an instrument and just wait for whoever pitches up. So you can literally find anyone in the roda who wants to test you. And you'll see as well that in some of the more esoteric moves, there are sort of remnants of, you know, some really dangerous movements. So what I would say that the intent isn't to hurt or to contact someone, but we train for that.
Yeah, that makes sense. If anyone's got questions, this is the time to chip in. Otherwise, I think I'd like to go back to what you were talking about the history of capoeira and its relationship to Africa. One of the things that really fascinates me about doing Kempo is its relationship to Asia. And what I had to do when I kind of got much more deeply into the art form was actually for myself, reconnect it back to India and back to my own roots. And I'm really interested in hearing your journey with that. Did that come first, or did that come afterwards? Did you sort of re-look at African culture through the lens of Capoeira, or did you kind of go, no, this is it, because it does have that heritage?
Yeah, I mean, it's unavoidably African.
Mm-hmm.
So there isn't really a way you can authentically experience capoeira without also considering its Africanness. There are other art forms across the African diaspora. So if you look in, for example, in Haiti, they have a very similar sort of form which is not capoeira. It's called. I have to find the name of it, and I can send you a link. But it has many, many, many similar aspects to it. So you can see that wherever they had taken people from West Africa to places like, Haiti, to Colombia, to Brazil, that you can piece these bits together and try and get back to this kind of essence of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so in my experience, I have been intrigued and fascinated about, so at what point did capoeira become this kind of thing, in that, I think the resistance element of it. And I think capoeira ultimately, in its current form, is a method of self-awareness and resistance to the norm. Yeah, hailing from, like I said, my Nigerian roots, contemporary Nigeria is very different from, if I was to take something like this to Nigeria and sort of play it, people would sort of look, well, what are you doing? And I think I saw some sort of a weirdo. So it's also very very complex. I think the relationship of some of the traditional art forms that one might have seen, many years ago compared to what you had today. So yeah, I've tried to reconcile that.
Yeah, it makes sense to me. I once had a Japanese person once described Shorinji Kempo as Morris dancing to me. So I kind of have that understanding that you're kind of doing this ancient art form, which for me goes all the way back to sort of yogic terms through that Silk Road. But like you kind of, if you took it back, they'd just kind of think you're a bit nuts. Like, why are you doing this? So it's like, yeah, I totally get that.
It's almost it's almost as if I find that sort of a lot of contemporary Africans have kind of discarded a lot of those traditions and a lot of those customs in favor of, modernity, right? But in doing so, they've lost a lot of the complexity and a lot of the richness that has kind of made Africans and made specifically West Africans, and brought all of these amazing art forms to life as well. So,
yeah, how do we make spaces that are, we're creating these spaces, we're bringing people into this art form that clearly you love, it's incredible. How do you bring more diversity? How do you perhaps reach out to people who have lost that in their heritage? Or I don't know about you, but when I was growing up as a kid, I kind of really just threw it away. It was like, yeah, I am Asian, but I'm not really. I'm kind of I've assimilated. It's all fine. How do we take that and encourage the next generation to create safer spaces?
And it's a really important question. I think. I think making it more accessible, particularly in places of learning, is hugely important. So what we've done, I'm based in Bristol. What I've done, and what the groups I work with here have done as well, is sort of taking it to schools, for example. And it's amazing how engaged children are with these art forms, because they're so, I guess, naturally. You don't require anything other than yourself to participate. So it's, in terms of egalitarian, and you don't need any particular equipment, you don't need to put on any specific kind of clothing, you don't need to go into any sort of, you just need yourself and one other, right? And you can do capoeira. So when we've taken it to schools, we found that just children have been really, really open, because they're naturally wired to sort of connect with their friends and their compatriots and play.
Yeah.
And play really is so important. And I think the ability to play is something that we lose as, you know, the older we get, because societal structures, you know, make it harder for us to feel comfortable, like you're talking about, have a safe space to feel I can take off all of this outside stuff and just play, just be myself, just enjoy myself.
Yeah.
So I think definitely places of learning, making it accessible in those places is key to that. Yeah, so capoeira struggled, I think, with being very male dominated. Like a lot of the masters are male, and a lot of the teachers are also male. And at least in Bristol, the group that I go to here are really trying to promote a lot more female, what we call trainels. So these are the ones who are going to be kind of going into the upper echelons, becoming professors and then becoming masters, right? So trying to do a lot more with sort of picking out people who obviously are interested, but, you know, kind of helping them develop. And then they've started a debate as to sort of, well, what does it actually mean as a woman to practice capoeira? Because, you know, some of the movements that we do, there's a lot of, you know, you probably have seen in the video, there's a lot of, you know, handstands, a lot of upper body work, a lot of you know, cartwheels, for example. So, you know, maybe, you know, during you know, your normal cycle, some of those movements might not be appropriate. So how do we adjust our teaching to make it more appropriate and more sensitive to the fact that actually, as men and as women, we might want to train in different ways.
That's really interesting. I know that Ophelia's been doing some work around fitness levels around a normal female cycle, but we also have lots of cartwheels and handstands and all sorts of things. I think one thing that struck me when we spoke at Christmas is how hard COVID has been for your family. But I wanted to ask you how Capoeira has supported you through it.
So I would say, just on the whole, it's been a really interesting period. In terms of how capoeira has supported me through this, and I think I mentioned earlier that, you know, I feel very much capoeira it's part of who I am. It's part of my personality now. But again, actually, through the lockdown period, we just haven't had as much time to do what you saw in the video, right? I mean, it's impossible actually to meet like that and to participate like that, you know, in larger groups, you know, being on one-on-one with another individual. So, you know, a lot of the groups that you know, a lot of the capoeira groups have had to do like we're doing now, resort to Zoom meetings and try and participate like that, and it's just not the same. You know, when the first lockdown ended and we were able to sort of gather in groups of 6, it was straight back on it. We went straight back into, like, you know, a space, and it felt like a big, you know, just a relief, just a real release. One of the things I miss a lot is just singing.
Yeah.
I just miss being able to sing and being able to sing in a group of people. So again, yeah, although Zoom has allowed us to do the movement bit, maybe a bit more, it's just not, we just haven't been able to do all of the other stuff that kind of glues it together. So I really can't wait till this lockdown ends, and then we can kind of, you know, at least meet outdoors and start to train properly again a little bit.
No, I think we share that. I mean, we've done a year now on being on this Zoom call. We've hijacked one of it and taking I mean, we can do things like this, which is hijack a class and talk to you, which is fantastic. But I think we're all desperate to get back into a dojo. And like you said, kick each other in the head. That's definitely missing. Although I really want to do it to music now with the instruments. So that's very exciting. Before we wrap up, is there any questions from anyone else? I mean, Charles, what have I missed? Was there anything you wanted to tell us that I've missed today?
I mean, I as I was kind of preparing for this session, and you know, I've just been struck, I think, because I also do have taken up Tai Chi over the last couple of years as well. And I've been struck by the relationship between the martial side of the art form and the dance side of the art form. And I wanted to just, I think there's this kind of dichotomy of, it's like you've got one or the other. You know, you're either dancing or you're sort of punching and kicking. And I think that they're far more connected than kind of first comes to mind. I wanted to kind of just kind of get your thoughts a bit as well on whether you see that in Shorinji Kempo, because I mean, if you look at some of the classical or classic dance styles, I mean flamenco, I mean there's a martial aspect to flamenco, and I learned the other day that there's this relationship between ballet and fencing, kind of this sort of, again, these two things are connected. So I just it's just something that kind of came up and that was really fascinated me, and I just wanted to, but you were mentioning about really wanting to do kind of Kempo to music. I just was like, I wonder how that would manifest itself.
I don't know if anyone else has got any thoughts, but before I dive in. No? Yes?
Go ahead.
So flamenco actually is connected to traditional Indian dancing, more southern forms as well. You can actually see there's some relationship. They don't know where it comes from, but they sort of can see there's a link between them. And so I can see a link between our art form all the way back through to sort of traditional South Indian predominantly dancing. So some of the forms we strike. But actually, I just need the movement. I mean, we have been clubbing together. I remember this. Now, you brought up Iceni's. I'm not sure we got to Iceni's. We've definitely been to enough dance floors together to know that, like, the movements that we have on the dance floor definitely allows us to move seamlessly in the dojo as well. So I agree with you. But we've been friends for years, so that's probably why we think the same way. Any thoughts on being embarrassed and getting rid of that, Charles?
Oh, that is actually a really good aspect of it, because you'll notice that I think one of the things you confront very early on is yourself in the circle, because effectively you're being watched on all sides. In terms of the embarrassment, it's kind of there, but you're less you're conscious of it, but it doesn't stop you.
That sounds good. I'm going to wrap up there. Charles, this has been illuminating, and as ever, you're hugely articulate, and this is brilliant. So thank you so much. And, and sharing both the sort of fun journey and the difficult journey all in one space. We will wrap up here and say thank you. So I will stop recording.